Hi everyone, welcome to my Shoreline studio. I'm Sybil Muschik. Behind the camera is Joshua Blanc. Today we're just going to fiddle around a little bit with a comparison. And I've been working with the oil printing inks, and Daniel Smith and Shiva printing inks, and they're pretty close. Daniel Smith is probably much better in quality, but both are pretty good. And of course our Amsterdam acrylics, and we're going to try comparing them. It's sort of apples and oranges, but we should see some differences as to which one you're going to choose to work with on a consistent basis. Now there's lots to be said for acrylic paint, and there's lots to be said for the oil, and I'm kind of leaning more towards the oil all the time because of the fact that I don't have a drying time problem. So, and the way of handling is very, very close. And sometimes I think the oil is better in some respects. So anyway, we'll see. We'll work it out. Here's a couple of examples. Now this, I started with the acrylic because it dries faster, as I've said. And we're just using some basic stencils. When you're just experimenting, just go back to your basic supplies so that you're not having to worry about a lot of variables. Just straightforward gel plate printing. Good for beginners, I guess, to see how things work. Now here, this one I did, this is acrylic, and I had some medium on it. It breaks the paint up a little bit, and it's just the retarder by Golden. It helps the paints dry a little slower, so I'm wondering maybe if by using the open thinner, which is for open paints to make them, and open paints, we'll be working with them in the future. The open thinner may stop it from breaking up almost like water, so especially when we're using the brush later on. So we'll give it a shot. I've set out my paints already, just primaries, and this is sap green, but I have phthalo green in the oil. It's I can mix it a little bit to get it closer in color. It's down in here. Okay, so I have two 8x10 gel plate. One is the Jelly Arts, but I'm not sure which, and the other one is just gel press. This one is gel press, I think. Okay, and they're interchangeable. They're both really good gel plates. I'm just going to mix this a little bit, and we'll see about consistency and whether we have to worry about it drying really fast. Okay. And so our green is got to be a little bit more on the turquoise. This is sap green, which has quite a bit of yellow in it. So we're going to pull some down. And we're going to add some phthalo blue to it, just so it's a little bit closer and the comparison is better to the oil. I have only a small amount of oil painting inks. Some of them, it's been a long time since I've used them, so some of them have dried up, but I've got some good basics. So more mixing here. And it looks pretty good. The red, this is primary red. It's a museum paint. It's a little bit higher in value than the oil, but I think we'll just sort of work with it the way it is. So we're just going to put a little bit. We'll start with the primary red. We'll brayer out an area. Yeah, that looks not too bad. Maybe it stops it from breaking up as much. That's good. We'll add a touch of yellow to that just to warm it up. The primary red leans more towards the blue. Okay. And that'll mix sort of as we print it too. And I'm just going to brayer off what we have because now we're going to get into our secondary color, which is green. And we're adding a little bit of the phthalo to it just to make it a little bit more like a phthalo green. I think that's pretty good. And we can just add it to the plate. Now it's wise not to use too much paint. If I put it on directly, there's a good chance that I'm going to put too much on. This way, we're going to get some nice transparent values. Leaning more towards the blue here. And phthalo on this end because it's closer to the green. Okay. So it's not quite a rainbow, but we'll have some interesting colors. I'll keep the divisions fairly discreet. Right, and we can brayer off. Now we used sort of Greek pattern. Now I sort of have to remember which way I'm putting it down. And just place it down. With this, I could just go to ordinary copy paper. With the oil, because it seeps in a little bit, I'm going to be using heavier cardstock. This is the regular FSC, I think it's for, you can buy it at Staples. So most papers nowadays are archival, unless you're buying it from a really cheap place, then it's probably not acid-free, but these are acid-free. And they have, they're nice bright white. Okay, so and now that's a really bright combination here. Now what we can do, and hopefully, and this is a good trick, is place it down again, line it up. Now if it's offset slightly, which it will be, you'll get kind of a shadow tone, which is quite interesting. Yes. So you get sort of an intaglio outline from the edge. Oops, we have a fuzzle. And then you get a bit of a shadow tone, which is really nice, and some of the white's covered up. So it looks very three-dimensional. So this is a fun way to work. Now, but basically we're far more interested in, how this looks compared to the oil. So we'll put this aside. So that one turned out really good. We'll just have another quick look at it. You can see all the line work in here, the intaglio, and one little spot, I guess, that was left behind. Because we did a double print, there's not enough paint on the plate to pick up a ghost print. Now it's a little bit different with the oil paints because you have to roll the ink a bit. And I have some burnt plate oil That's just linseed oil that's been put in the sun for a bit. And you need it to make the paint a little more fluid. But you don't need a lot. Just a tiny, tiny amount. And we're trying to get a consistency and transparency close to what we did with the acrylic. I might have to bring in another plate eventually for this, but should be fine. So roll it until on your little palette until it's a good consistency. Well, you're probably going to need a little bit more. I have put some tape on this little painting knife because that way I don't mix up, you know, oil and water don't mix, right? So keep everything on its own. No, just a little bit more paint. We want about the same intensity as the acrylic paint. Otherwise it won't be a good comparison. There we go. And then into the yellow. Now, the yellow is a little bit easier to work with than the red. And just a drop. And I didn't brayer off the primary red very much, so this will work. So you're just going to have to roll and roll and roll until it gives you that nice tone you want. Okay. Now to clear off everything on here, I'm going to have another roll-off sheet here so they don't mix. And you get most of it off. If you're still wanting more off, then use mineral oil. And we use mineral oil for the acrylics too, so you're not doing anything really much different. Just a drop or two and then wipe it. And that's how you can clean your brayer. I took the stencil to the sink for the acrylic, and because we had the medium on there, it wiped off really well. You don't want to be putting that ink down the sink. That's a rule around here, no ink down the sink. So you don't want to mess up your plumbing. We're on a septic tank, that's probably not good for it, so these things need to be considered. Right, okay, now we're on to our phthalo green. And there's still a bit of yellow on my, so because the acrylics it was sap green, which is a yellow green, and this one is a blue green. So I think we're pretty close in consistency here. And tone. All right. Now this one is a little bit more stubborn, but it rolls out really well. I didn't need to really add any burnt plate oil to it. And just get it on there. And it's rolling very nicely. Now I still have a little bit of a mineral oil on my brayer. And as you can see, it rubs off really easily. Cleanup is always a process, and so you want something that's as quick as possible without spending a lot of time at the sink. We're not about doing the dishes, are we? Okay, so now we need that blue. Now, as you can see, the blue is extremely dark. I'm not even sure. Yes. So we're going to bring it up in value to about the value that we had with the acrylic paint. That's about right. I think consistency is good, so we can get it on there directly. And roll it out. Okay. With the oil, you do have to roll a little bit more. Sometimes with acrylic paint, as you're rolling it out, it picks it back up again because the paint is drying on you. That doesn't happen with the oil, so that's a plus for the oil. So just trying to get it to that nice consistency. And brayer off. Some of these brayer off sheets are really stunning. And we place our stencil. So that's our first thing. Just tack it down here. Just your basic gel printing procedure. Exactly what you do when you're first learning. So sometimes it's really interesting to go back to the basics, and then you find you can take it up a notch because you've learned that first process so well. And we will print without the stencil on there. And nice consistent rubbing the back so that we have a good print. So okay, now our first major comparison here. Here is the acrylic, and here's the oil. Now, which one do you like better? This one's a little bit more subtle. The orange here is quite bright. We have pretty close. The sharpness of the oil, I think, is better. So again, it all depends on how you want to work. If you want something a little bit more immediate, oil might be your way of going about it, and not so frustrating trying to work with a fast drying acrylic paint. So I'm really, and the oil just has that special quality. So there we go. Okay, so I'm just going to clean this stencil off, and all you do is you take a little bit of mineral oil and it wipes right back. Just put a paper towel underneath, and you're good to go. So it's a little kinder on your stencils too. So. Okay, we're at the painting stage. Remember, I'm the one who loves to do the painterly print. So water-based paint are Amsterdam acrylics, and just starting exactly the same way. We're just going to make some lines. We're not going to be thinking about that because it's all about the comparison today. So mind you, as you're working, you'll probably get reasonably creative and do weird and wonderful things. However, here we go. So we're just going to do some nice lines. I still have the thinner medium in there, the open thinner. So we're going to do a number of lines. And then maybe we'll do some marks. Maybe some broken marks. You can, go relatively crazy with this. Try and keep your paint as consistent as possible. Now, the idea here is to show the brush marks, right? So you can manipulate it any which way. Do some fun stuff. You can turn it, you can twist it. Go across this way. Maybe some cross hatching. Whatever you want to do. Everything prints. Okay, so I'm going to just wet my brush. Since this is water-based, we can take most of the paint out this way. That may be one advantage to acrylic painting. Just making sure the medium is mixed in well. Okay, so we have a few spaces here we can fill with the yellow. Keep your paint relatively thin, otherwise it's going to just squish out on you. So a nice variety of marks, again, some twisty, turny things. Be inventive and creative. Even exercises should be fun. I mean, you could do little color swatches in a field of another color. Those are good things to do. Good discipline too, and you can learn a lot from that. Or you can dabble a little bit. Okay, so that's... Now I'm hoping that we can print right away and not have to put a medium on and then wait. Okay, let's try our green here. A little bit of the phthalo. Some people say phthalo. It depends what school you went to and what instructors. So thin and thick, maybe round. Maybe dabs. Ending up with our ultramarine. So you can get most of the paint off just dabbing and wiping. Right. It's good to get all the water out because otherwise you're going to have this problem with the paint breaking up and creating little bubbles. Again, you know, try some interesting marks. Don't forget there's thick and thin. I love these brushes because they have a nice chisel edge to them, and at the same time you get a beautiful wide mark. So let's do the chisel edge and you'll see what I mean. Just a really thin line. I think this brush has seen better days, but there are all sorts of good, these are the square brushes, and I think mine are university, yep, university, and it's a series 237 bright. This is a bright. So Winsor Newton, of course, they make good brushes. Okay, so dip and wipe. And then we should be able to print. Looks like it's good. Again, just bond is good. You know, for exercises, you don't need to use your good cardstock up. Depending, with collage papers, obviously you want them thinner, so you could use deli paper or oriental paper. Bond paper works if it's archival. Sometimes, you know, these kinds of works end up being the best special ones that, you know, are good for showing, so always use the best materials if you can. Doesn't pay to have cheap paint or cheap paper. Okay, let's have a look at this. Okay, so fairly consistent. Paint didn't break up much because it's a little more fluid. It's good. Okay. Reminds me of a desert with cactus or something. Blooming. All right. You caught me. Anyway, I'm just getting stuff prepared here for this next part, and that has to do with the oil-based printmaking inks. And these dry on the paper. Once it's on paper, it dries. It's not quite like painting on canvas. These dry within a couple of days, whereas on canvas it might take up to a week. They have a linseed oil base. I would probably prefer the walnut oil, like my oil paints. A lot of people are allergic, you know, to the fumes or just to linseed oil, and that might not be the way you want to go. But there are a lot of good oil paints that are based in walnut oil, but the printmaking inks, I think, are still linseed oil based. Anyway, okay, so we will do our lines. As I mentioned earlier, I put a tiny little, like a drop of burnt plate oil, which is a type of, and I don't mind the smell or you know, of the linseed oil, burnt plate oil. It's not as strong as, say, regular linseed oil. And you can see it's really easy to make a consistent line with the oil paint, more so than the acrylic, I find. And a nice line. As far as I know, it's pretty well the same brush. The other one might have been a bit older, but close enough. Okay, so I've got a nice straight, and then do some cross hatching. Do some marks. See how that shows up. Okay. Now we need just a little bit of our mineral oil. That's just baby oil, so you use it on babies, so it's not bad for you. I'm just trying to get most of the oil off. As you can see, the color is very intense. Again, that's quality. Okay, let's go to our yellow. Now, I need to probably work it out a bit. Tiny bit of the burnt plate oil so it's more malleable, I guess is a good word. Workable. And let's do some lines. Let's do some relatively interesting and crazy stuff. Just to keep it fresh. Right, we don't have to take too much of the yellow out. And then you have to take some out because you still have a little bit of red in the brush. And if you mix your green and red, you'll get a tertiary, which is a neutral color. So if you want to keep it clean and bright color, then you do need to clean your brush. And look at these beautiful lines. Like I say, I'm leaning towards the oil paint more and more. And I don't have to worry at all about them drying. On the gel plate, they will stay at least a couple of days before you have to worry that it won't print anymore. As oil paint oxidizes, and that's how it dries. Okay, so let's do some strange and wonderful marks. Whatever you can think of, it will all print and be interesting. And these little exercises might make wonderful collage papers, or just mount them in your journal to show what you've done and what you've learned from making these comparisons. Right, okay. Yes, and look at that consistency and intensity. Let's do our blue. Maybe darken it a hair. Tiny bit of burnt plate oil. Less than a drop, just a touch. Just so you can get the consistency that makes the brush work for you. Okay, so let's just play with this a little bit. And you can make some beautiful, precise marks. And I can take my time, other than, you know, our video time, which is always precious and very fast to run out. Yeah. So you can make very precise, beautiful marks. And you could try maybe in here. And maybe some circles in the center of these, whatever these are. And I think that's it for now. And we print. Now I'm going to use the cardstock for this. Because it is an oil-based, ink, if you use bond paper, it will leach through and make oil stains on your paper. So better to use a heavier duty paper, or you could easily do this on canvas. I'm just going to put it on the other side because that's dry now. So look at how interesting that is, and you can see the brush marks very clearly. So it's very nice. Now the nice thing about this as well is, and you can't do that now without, on the acrylic side, is you can't do another print unless you put medium down, and you have to wait. Whereas here, if you want a ghost print, it's instant. And sometimes the ghost print is way nicer than the... It's a little more subtle. We've picked up a good share of the paint before we lost all the yellow. But now you can, ghost prints often you can deal with in another way. You can put a whole layer of color on top of that, maybe an iridescent, or some kind of a metallic color. It's all fair game. So just to recap here, this is acrylic, Amsterdam acrylic, with a little bit of the golden thinner in there. And here are the marks. They're quite nice. You can see the brush marks very well. Fair intensity of color. The yellow is really nice in this case. And the blue worked out really well. So not quite as thin a line. Here the oil paint I had far more control. So that could be just a brush problem rather than a medium problem. But, this one is immediate. You can print this and the ghost print. This one, if you wanted to do the ghost print, which is there, I'd have to put medium on it and then put the paper on that and then wait for it to dry. So there you have it. You have the two, and up to you how you want to work. So, and maybe it's possible that some of the days you do acrylic and some days you like to play with the oil. because probably you can play with this a little bit longer, whereas here you've got more cleanup, more waiting time for sure. So anyway, thanks so much for watching again. Thank you for all the likes and the subscriptions. We really appreciate it, and our channel is growing, and we really appreciate all your comments. And I have one coming up that was a suggestion, which we're going to do, where somebody wanted reflections and the water lilies and cattails. I'm not sure I wanted all those things in there, but we'll give it a shot in a future video. And we are delayed about a couple of weeks for each video, because we post alternately now. So anyway, be sure and watch our upcoming videos. We really enjoy working here and showing all these tutorials, and much more to come. So take care of yourselves, take care of your families, be kind to one another. Bye for now.